Okay, so you have come to section 2.5 in math. Everything up until now has been nothing but review, and that's the reason why I didn't have any videos on that, except if you needed help on something, just to kind of let you get back into the basic math. These were all things that you have to know, for daily life in math, or daily life, period, using math. All right, so let's look at section 2.5. This is going over latitude and longitude. Now, this is going to be a lot of review as well, but it's a little bit longer and kind of getting into different things, so I wanted to make sure and do this lesson with you. So at the bottom of page 46, while we're reviewing negative numbers, we're going to take a look at a couple of fun applications we didn't have time for in book 1. These applications are examples of how negative numbers help us describe God's creation. Consider the task of describing specific locations on Earth. Where exactly is Brasilia, the capital of Brazil in South America, and Brazzaville, the capital of Congo in Africa? How far apart are the two cities? If you're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, where exactly are you in comparison? Which way do you need to travel? So let's look there at page 47, and it shows where those two places are directly across the ocean from one another. We need a way to refer to a specific location on Earth. You have one. Join me in looking at it now at latitude and longitude. Now, you can consider this actually, I guess, social studies in a way, geography. So first, latitude. We use an imaginary line called the equator to divide the Earth in half horizontally. Then we mark distances by how they relate to the equator, picturing additional imaginary parallel lines called lines of latitude as dividing the Earth. Okay, and if you'll look at the top of page 48, you'll see some of those. Now, notice I'm in the gray box. Notice that we've used the word line to describe the equator. While you may be used to thinking of a line as a breadthless length, we view a line as a great circle in spherical geometry. The Earth is spherical in shape, so spherical geometry helps us describe locations on its surface. So we measure the distance of latitudes from the equator in degrees, breaking up the distance from the equator to either pole in 90 degrees, and then further into minutes and seconds. Any point on the equator is considered to be at 0 degrees latitude. To differentiate between locations above the equator from those below, we would use the words north or south, or a positive or negative sign. For example, a location that's 30 degrees south of the equator would be referred to as having a latitude of 30 degrees south or negative 30 degrees, while a location 30 degrees north of the equator would be referred to as having a latitude of 30 degrees north or 30 degrees. So that last picture down there at the bottom of page 48 shows you your 0 degree mark is the equator. And then if you go south, remember how in the last book we were doing, we were graphing, on graph paper. I know at some point we didn't have it, but you were studying graph paper. This is kind of the same thing. They've divided the Earth up into like a piece of graph paper so that you can pinpoint the different places and the different locations. Now, look at the top of page 49. Much as the equator serves as a reference point for horizontal locations, we use an imaginary line called the prime meridian for a vertical reference. So there's a picture of your prime meridian. We then mark distances by how they relate to the prime meridian, viewing these as being additional imaginary lines called lines of longitude. And there at the bottom of page 49 is another picture of the Earth with the lines of longitude. Now the prime meridian is at 0 degrees. We then measure the distance of longitudes from the prime meridian. To differentiate between locations to the right of the prime meridian from those to the left of the prime meridian, we use the words east and west, or a positive and negative sign. For example, a location that's 30 degrees west of the prime meridian would be referred to as having a longitude of 30 degrees west or negative 30 degrees, while a location 30 degrees east of the prime meridian would be referred to as having a longitude of 30 degrees east or positive 30 degrees. So it's just like when we had the plane on our, paper, our graph paper, and we drew the big cross so that we had our line that goes down, our line that went right across and where it met in the middle. And some of those planes were negative and some were positive, depended on if it was to the right or the left of the one that went up and down, or to the top or bottom of the one that went across. Look at page 50. And there you go. There's your lines of longitude. Now, every location on Earth has both a longitude and a latitude. By listing these values, we can easily describe a city's location. Let's see this in action with those two cities, Brasilia, which is the capital of Brazil in South America, and Brazzaville, the capital of Congo in Africa. Brasilia has a latitude of negative 15.78 degrees and a longitude of negative 47.93 degrees. Brazzaville has a latitude of negative 4.27 and a longitude of positive 15.28. And there you go. You can see the map of it at the bottom of page 50, where those are, both its latitude and longitude. The latitude and longitude values give us a way of describing these cities' exact locations. We can also use these values to compare their locations. To understand how, though, we first have to review absolute value. So at the top of 51, there's a big gray box, reviewing absolute value. Now, this is something we did learn in book 1. The absolute value is the fancy name for the value of a quantity, regardless of whether it's positive or negative. The absolute value of both positive 5 and negative 5 is 5. It doesn't matter if we mean 5 to the right or 5 to the left. Both are 5 away from 0. So, underneath that line in the gray box, you'll see the 5 that looks like this. And it's got your lines here, okay? That means the absolute value of 5, which is 5. Basically, when you see these lines, it's asking you, how far away from 0 is this number? Well, it's 5 away from 0, okay? And it can be positive or negative. This is at the very bottom of the gray box. The absolute value of positive 5 or the absolute value of negative 5 equals 5. It doesn't matter. It's 5 away from 0. Now, if all we care about is the distance between the latitude and longitude of two locations, not the direction, we find the absolute value of the difference between them. For example, if one city is at a latitude of positive 5 and the other at negative 5, we'd find the distance between them by finding the absolute value of the difference between positive 5 and negative 5. We do this by subtracting one from the other and then taking the absolute value. Subtracting to find the difference, 5 minus negative 5 equals 5 plus 5, because remember you take the opposite, which equals 10. And then you take the absolute value of 10, and that is 10. Since we're taking the absolute value in the end anyway, we could just subtract either location from the other. We'll get the same answer in the end. So subtracting negative 5 minus 5 equals negative 10, but the absolute value of negative 10 is 10 anyway, so it doesn't matter which way you do it. So if one city is at the latitude of positive 5 and another at the latitude of negative 5, the distance between them is 10 degrees of latitude. This can be easily seen on a number line. So let's just think of the 0 as the equator. And one location is at negative 5, the other location is at positive 5. So the absolute value, the distance between those, is just 10 points, or just 10. Now that was a simple example. Let's take a look at one with more realistic numbers. In fact, let's look at the difference in longitude between Brasilia and Brazzaville. Note, I think I say that different every time. I don't know how you pronounce it. Note that we can use the same approach to find the latitude between two cities. Let's look at page 52. Example, what's the difference in longitude between Brasilia and Brazzaville? Brasilia is negative 47.93 degrees. Brazzaville is plus 15.28 degrees. So to find the answer, we need to subtract one longitude from the other. In other words, find the difference between them, and then take the absolute value of that difference. So we're going to take negative 47.93, and we're going to find the difference of plus 15.28, which it is negative 63.21. Then you take the absolute value of that number, and your absolute value is 63.21. Now, you could also have found the same answer by subtracting negative 47.93 from positive 15.28. You're still going to end up with 63.21. No matter how we find it, there's a 63.21 degree difference in longitude between those cities. Okay? So latitude and longitude definitely is something that we use negative and positive numbers for. Now, not that you're going to use latitude and longitude every single day of your life, because I've used it probably zero. But nonetheless, you may use it at some point in time. So let's look at your worksheet 2.5. So at the top, A, B, C, and D, you're just simply going to find the absolute value. Remember, the absolute value is a fancy way of saying how far away is this number from zero. That's all it is. The answer is always positive because it's just simply that's how many points it is away from zero. Now, on number 2, A and B, that's going to be where you're figuring the latitude and longitude. Remember, you just get the difference between the two. So you're just subtracting positive and negative numbers. So the rules still apply. Okay? And then you're going to take the absolute value of whatever answer you get. And that's how you do it. All right? Now, 3A, B, and C, you're again just using latitude and longitude. And you're going to be finding the difference between those. Number 4 is skill sharpening, and number 5 is geometry time. I am going to grade this page. Now, what I am going to do here in just a second is I'm going to try and find a chart that I can post on the screen that will help you remember the rules of adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers, because I've noticed that we've had a little bit of difficulty in those, okay? So let me go ahead and do that, and you can begin your worksheet 2.5. Okay, here's a good chart that you might want to write down and just kind of show you that when you add two positives, you get a positive. When you add, you have this is multiplication. That's not good. This one, addition. Positive plus positive equals a positive, and then it gives an example. Negative plus a negative equals a negative. A positive plus a negative or a negative plus a positive gives you these, and you could write these down. This would be a really good chart for you to write down. Now, and it gives you the rules on subtraction and multiplication and division. So you might want to write this down. This is a really good chart. Let me check this. I think this is probably the best chart that I've seen. So I'm just going to leave it up here. If you want to pause it, write these down, color it, whatever, doesn't matter. Post it wherever you want it and use that. You will at some point be just like a bicycle. You'll just get used to these and you'll just simply know the rules. But until then, you might want to have something that you can look at. So anyway, use that as your you complete worksheet 2.5.